Hello everyone. Today I will lecture Unit 14, the law of God and the law of man. Hegel's interpretation of Sophocles' Antigone. Chapter 1, Plot of Antigone. Antigone was originally a tragic work by Sophocles, an ancient Greek playwright. Antigone is the eldest daughter of Oedipus. Oedipus was a tragic figure who was prophesied to kill his father and marry his mother. When the secret of Oedipus was revealed, he was expelled from the throne and deported from Thebes. But her eldest daughter Antigone helped her blind father. Oedipus pulls out his eyes and wanders all over Greece before dying in Athens. After his father's burial, Antigone returned to Thebes. Antigone's two brothers, Polynices and Eteocles, fight each other for the throne, but Polynices tried to defeat his brother's army by mobilizing troops from neighboring countries. Meanwhile, both brothers are killed in the battle. Creon, who succeeded them as king, should honor Eteocles and hold a funeral, as he died of loyalty to his nation. On the contrary, Creon treats Polynices as a traitor who betrayed the nation and prevents people from holding a funeral for Polynices. If not, they are ordered to be stoned to death by citizens. Let's see the beautiful pictures. Antigone with her blind father, Antigone drama is beautiful pictures. But Antigone, who acknowledges two brothers equally as a family, breaks the law of the state and sneaks out of the castle at night in order to find Polynices' body and perform the funeral by herself. Upon learning this, Creon is furious and puts Antigone in a dungeon cell for now. Blind prophet Tiresias says the gods are on Antigone's side. When Creon hears this, he repents and tries to save Antigone, but it was too late. Antigone, who was put in dungeon cell, had only committed suicide. Antigone's fiancé, Haemon, is the son of Creon. Haemon appears to the father Creon to forgive Antigone, but when not accepted, he ends up committing suicide too. A mother who hears of her son's tragedy also commits suicide. Creon loses his children and wife because of the laws of the gods. He learns a lesson from the punishment of God. Antigone tried to retrieve the body of his dead brother from the battlefield and give him a funeral. Chapter 2, the general nature of Greek tragedy. Sophocles' tragedy Antigone shows a high-quality play in ancient Greece. This is called tragedy. Tragedy refers to a serious play rather than necessarily a sad play. The opposite of tragedy is of course, a comedy. Unlike a modern tragedy, the Greek tragedies are generally faced with a disastrous ending that reveals inevitable confrontation and crisis. On the other hand, the modern tragedy occurs in subjective and individualistic behavior of characters, while coincidence playing an important role in it. It is a Sophocles' Antigone drama that best fits the frame of unreconciled conflict between the two forces, which result in destruction. Pretty ugly man. No. It's a photo of Hegel. Hegel's book, Pure Knowledge of Spirit. In this book, Hegel discussed the tragedy of Antigone. Chapter 3, Hegel's dialectical interpretation of Antigone. Dialectic can be said generally as the system of interactive and compromising thinking. Hegel tells the story of Antigone in the section Spirit A, True Mind, the ethical world, the phenomenology of spirit. Hegel's interpretation of Antigone is famous for his dialectical characteristic. Hegel says Sophocles' Antigone is the most noble and the most outstanding literary work in all history. There are two reasons for Hegel's compliment of the Antigone, in my opinion. The first, Literary quality of Antigone is excellent. Second, the work of Antigone has a very suitable composition for dialectic, which is a characteristic of Hegel's philosophy. The dialectic method has a structure in which two conflicting principles are established at the same time. Thus, dialectic is often said to be in violation of a formal logic, but this is a misunderstanding in my opinion. A detailed description of this is given in Unit 12 of my lecture, Dialectic of Essential Certainty in the Phenomenology of Spirit by Hegel. As shown in the Antigone summary above, Antigone represents women and the families as princesses of the kingdom of the Thebes. King Creon, on the other hand, representing the community, the kingdom, and the man. In other words, there is a confrontation between the thesis and antithesis. The nature of a dialectic consists in that a mutual conflict and negation between the opposite causes destruction. However, each of the opposite is preserved in the higher stage of development. This process is called sublimation, or in German, Aufhebung. Therefore, sublimation has three meanings. The first, abolish; the second, preserve; the third, enhance. Sublimation refers to the annihilation of a unilateral argument or prejudice of the opposing parties, while partial truth of the opposing parties is preserved again at the higher level, which appears as the legal status in the phenomenology of spirit. In some ways, dialectic is like the art of dialogue in which we make small concessions and compromise to find a consensus. The dialectic is, in other words, the conversational and the compromising way of thinking in handling the opposite argument. Chapter 4. Lively individualities representing abstract ideas. Literary works are not fully explained by any theory or any point of view because they are living creatures. However, Antigone's works are quite well interpreted in this way. That's how strong the philosophical characteristics of this work are. In other words, the literature contains ideas, but they are not just spoken, but expressed through lively individuality. Antigone is an unusual case of a perfect harmony of thought and artistry. So Hegel praised Sophocles' Antigone as the most noble and the most outstanding in all history. But the fact that philosophy is very integrated into literature does not necessarily mean that the work is the most outstanding in history. Antigone is performed the funeral for his brother Polynices, who is branded as a traitor. No matter how bad he did breaking the law and trying to gain power by attracting falling enemies, she cannot leave a dead brother in the field. The situation is quite ethically problematic. According to Creon, Polynices was a fugitive, but he tried to burn the land and the gods of his family to death and to drink the blood of his family and to drag others into slavery so that no one could be courteous and mournful, performing a funeral so that the body of Polynices would be eaten by birds and dogs and destroyed without the grave. However, Antigone, a woman but dignified, defends her plan of action to his younger sister Ismene, who is against holding a funeral breaking the law. I'll bury my brother's body. I might well die doing this. I'll lie beside him as a sister by my brother's side and be a criminal after doing godly things. It's a long time to be satisfied with the hearts of those below you. I'll have to lie there for forever. But if the other way seems to you better, ignore the honor to the gods and live well. At the end of the drama, the gods evaluate Antigone as right, and Creon, who destroyed humanity, is punished while losing all of his family. Creon also wants to repent for his action. Thus, most critics, including Sophocles himself, the author of Antigone, consider Antigone's actions and ideas are more righteous than Creon's patriotic political thinking. In my view, however, Creon also gets a good score because we have seen too much inhuman behavior of the leftist communists after the June 25 war in Korea. Moreover, in the East, there was even a 부관 참시, a penalty that dug up the dead body and damaged it. Thus, treason was dismissed as the greatest crime of all time. However, there were some excessive and emotional aspects in Creon's conduct. The problem of Creon was not the quality, but quantity. Dishonor of the treachery is right, but family morality is also to be respected. He must be more careful. Chapter 5, Human Law versus Divine Law. The conflict over the barrier of the dead between Creon and Antigone is understood by Hegel as a conflict between human law and God's law. Creon proclaims the law on behalf of his country and the community. In this respect, Creon is neither a tyrant nor a politician who invokes orders on his own terms, but rather a politician who clearly explains the purpose of his decree and even takes its verification from the state elders who appears as a chorus within the drama. Therefore, Creon decides that the traitor of his country should be eaten by birds and dogs without grave and should be sightseeing without a funeral, takes on the form of law. But Antigone's position is as firm as that of Creon, so the tragic catastrophe is inevitably already foreseen from the beginning. However, Antigone's decision to bury his dead brother suggests that she has a religious background, not just personal. Creon, how dare you violate this statute, Antigone? It seems to me that it is not Jews who commanded this, and that the goddess of justice who live with the gods of the underworld has not proclaimed such a law to humans. And I don't think your proclamation is that powerful. The mortal cannot go beyond the law of the unwritten but determined of gods, because the law is always alive, not just yesterday or today. And no one knows when it came into being. I decided that I wouldn't be punished by the gods for neglecting God's law just because any man's will is scary. Antigone argued that the law declared by Creon is different from the law of the gods, but the problem is the objective existence of such a God's law. No one has ever seen such a law. Therefore, there is no record. These laws are often called unwritten laws. The laws she claimed are different from the law of Creon. This is law of a family. Hegel sees this as a clash between the norms of a family represented by women and the norms of the community represented by Creon. Creon community human law, universality, written law. Antigone family, law of God, individuality, unwritten law. This is a diagram of the drama Antigone. Antigone's law, which supports his family, is said to be always alive, not just yesterday or today, and no one knows when it comes into being. On the basis of this belief, Antigone dares to disobey the law of the state and the king. Hegel's interpretation refers to the universality of the Creon's law, which is the universality that everyone must observe for the existence of a community. Here, a community or country refers to the city-state of Greece, the polis. On the other hand, Antigone's law or divine law symbolized the personal value that family members should keep. Neither the divine law nor the human law is perfect in itself, according to Hegel. Even if human law tries to suppress the divine law, it results in catastrophe. According to Antigone, the law called family ethics or humanity was enacted by the gods of the underworld. Here, the underworld is not hell, but the spiritual world or afterlife that comes after death. Therefore, Creon, who imprisoned Antigone in an underground prison for failing to abide by the law for the survival of the national community, faces a terrible end in which even his son and the wife are eventually lost. Hegel interpreted this as when state powers destroys homes, the community eventually collapses, because the national community is also filled with the members from home. In other words, the family produce and nurture children to raise the citizens. These citizens build up a community. Thus, In any case, the laws that destroy the conscious families and the individuals are actually illegal. The conflict of human law and divine law is to be solved in the higher stage, that is the real status from the manifest spirit. The former is about Greek ethics, the latter is about Roman legality. Thank you very much for listening. See you again